Hi, Teri here from Stamping Magic. Welcome back to my channel. Today's project is a box to hold a small wine bottle. Now, I've left the tails on the ribbon long because I may have to undo it and do it up again. But when I gift this, I will trim them down so they're much shorter. You can either undo the bow to get into the box, or you can carefully just slide it off. And then the box will open just like so. Isn't that neat? And inside is your small bottle of wine, and that just slots in. So if you're careful, you should be able to slide the ribbon back onto the box to secure it closed. But if you do this too many times, it'll become loose, so you will have to retie it. I've used the Hydrangea Haven stamp set together with the coordinating hydrangea dies, and the papers are from the Hydrangea Hill Designer Series paper pack. So let's get started. These are all the measurements you need for all the elements required to create this project. So if you're interested in reproducing it, take a screenshot so you can refer to it later. I'm using gorgeous grape cardstock for my box today. Now, the box is made up of three main parts. I have this large rectangular piece, and mine is A4 in length. If you use 8.5 inch by 11 inch card as your standard, 11 inches is absolutely fine. A4 is a little bit longer. Or you could even cut this piece from 12 inch by 12 inch card. This middle size square piece is for the top and the top sides of the box, and this smaller piece is for the front of the box. The larger piece is for the back and the bottom sides, as well as most of the base of the box. I've placed the larger piece into my Simply scoreboard with the short side across the top, and I'm scoring down at 2.5 inches and 5 inches. Then I'm going to rotate my cardstock so the long side is across the top and score down at 2.5 inches, 7.5 inches and 9.5 inches. This area with the two score lines will go towards the top of the box, and the opposite side is obviously the base. Now I've turned it back so the base is towards me, it's closest to me, and I'm going to score down at 2 inches, but only to that second score line, and then also at 5.5 inches, but again only to that second score line. I've now placed my square piece in the Simply scoreboard, and I'm going to score down at 2.5 inches and 5 inches. Then I'm going to turn my card and score at 2.5 inches. The smallest piece goes into the Simply scoreboard with the shortest side across the top, and I'm going to score down at 1/2 inch and 3 inches. Then I'm going to turn it and score at 2.5 inches and 4.5 inches. This next piece is actually optional, and it's just a little tray to go inside the bottom of the box to hold the bottle a bit more steady. Now you want to score this piece at 1/2 inch on all sides. It's 3.5 inches square, less a tiny slither on 2 of the sides, so it's just a little under 3.5 inches. I'm going to cut a circle from the centre so the bottle can sit in it, and I'm using one of the layering circle dies for this. You'll need to position the die in the centre, and it needs to be big enough that the bottle can sit in it. This die was too small, so I've gone one size bigger, which is actually the 4th size down. And that sits nicely. around the bottle. You don't want it too big because then it won't steady the bottle. You want it as tight to the base of the bottle as you can get it. I'm going to create a tiny little tab on each of the corners just by cutting up that score line, and then I'm going to notch either end of the tab, either side of it. So I've done those two, and then I'm going to flip it round and do the two on the opposite side. So it's just a tiny slither that I'm cutting away when I do that slant cut. I can then fold on all the scored lines and burnish them with my bone folder. To create the tray, all you need to do is add glue onto each of the corner tabs in turn and position them against the adjacent side section. Just hold them in place for a couple of seconds until they take, and then move on to the next corner. And as you do each corner, make sure it remains nice and square. And then just check that your bottle fits, and we'll use this later. I now need to mark the position for the angled cuts on each of the sides. Now you want to measure up from the base of the box, so it's the side with only one score line. I'm using my grid paper to help me measure this, and I'm going to mark at 4.5 inches on each side with a pencil. Now you want to do that on the largest piece and on the square piece. Now on the square piece, this is for the top of the box, remember, so the score line is towards the top. So it's that side you're going to measure down from, but it's still at 4.5 inches. So if you've got the score line towards the left hand side, just again mark at 4.5 inches on each of the sides. There is some cutting to do on these pieces, and starting with the larger piece, I'm going to cut up the score lines to the first horizontal score line, and this is the base of the box, and I'm going to separate the 3 tabs. Now I'm making 2 cuts on each score line because I'm removing the score line, but I'm just taking away a tiny slither of cardstock, and the cuts are straight, no slanted cuts here. On the top of the box there are 4 sections on each corner. Now I'm going to remove the outside 3 sections on each of the corners, so I'm just going to leave the bottom smaller tab on each side. So I've started by cutting away the outside larger tabs, they're not needed, and then I can remove this smaller top tab. Now when I remove it, I'm going to leave the bottom tab, but I want the top and bottom edge slant cut, like so. Now I'm going to repeat that for the opposite side. So first of all, I'm going to cut along the score line and then remove the outside larger sections. And then I'm going to cut away that top small tab and slant the top and the bottom of the remaining tab. And this is what it should look like. For the square piece, all I have to do is cut up the vertical score lines to the horizontal and remove that score line. So again, I'm making 2 cuts and I'll end up with 3 tabs, and these will form the lid of the box. On the smaller piece, I've placed the biggest section farthest away from me. So this bottom section, I'm going to cut away both of the side tabs. And as I do this, I'm going to slant cut the bottom of that remaining tab. So I'm cutting it away from the other side, and then I'll just slant cut that bottom edge. Now on the other score line you want to do an acute V cut, and what I mean by this is not a little notch. You want to give it a good slanted cut, okay, like so. And I'm increasing the slant on the ones I've already made as well. So on that score line I'm slant cutting either side of it to cut out a big V. On the top edge I will do another acute angled cut. So it's a good slanted cut. It's not a little notch, it's a, you know, big cut, as you can see. It's very difficult to explain. Now on the two larger sections I'm going to make a slant cut to form the shape for the sides. Remember that the marks were measured up from the tab end, and you're going to cut from the mark to the opposite end, just at the top of the score line. So I find it easiest to use a guillotine, but you could use a trimmer to do this. So I'm lining up my cutting edge with the pencil mark down at the bottom in this case, and the top of the score line, and I'm just cutting that away. And then I'm going to the opposite side, lining up the score line towards the bottom and the pencil mark at the top and cutting that away. And the two pieces you cut away should be identical. So that's the top section done. Now the base is just a little more involved because we've got that middle piece. Now you need to fold it down out the way and those little tabs, because you want to get right into that corner, the top of the score line. So I'm lining that up with the blade, and then I'm lining up the pencil mark towards me. Just take your time, and when you're happy, cut it away. And then turning it over to the opposite side, make sure that tab is folded in out the way so you can get right into that top corner. Lining that up with the blade and the pencil mark. And again, we'll cut that away. And remember, your two pieces that you've cut away should be identical. It's just a little check for you. Don't forget to erase the pencil marks that you made. I can now go ahead and fold on all of the score lines on all three pieces and then burnish them with my bone folder. I now need to cut out the oval on the smaller piece, and this goes on the larger section of that piece. Now I'm using a die from the layering oval set to do this. If I try the fourth size down, this you can see is much too small. It won't go over the bottle, so it would be no good. So I'm going one size up. Now this also will not quite go over the bottle. The cutting blade is not right on the edge, it's just in a little bit. So this one will actually be fine. Now all I'm going to do is centre it by eye and run it through my die cutting machine. Once the oval's been cut out, you want to check the side tabs against the side slants that we cut on the biggest piece. Now remember those acute cuts I told you to do? If you've got them correct, this will sit nicely where it should and you'll get a good join. However, if you haven't done an acute enough cut, that piece will overlap the score line and it will cause problems, so it won't sit nicely. So I'll bring this up to the camera in a second and see if I can show you. So that cut there that we made at the top is well within the score line, so it's not in the way. If it was in the way, it wouldn't sit properly in the box. Okay, you can see it's inside of that score line, and that's where you want it. So if yours isn't, then snip a bit more away. Now once you're happy with it, you can add glue to both the side tabs on one side only. And you can use tape adhesive for this if you want to. I just prefer wet adhesive. It gives me that wiggle room that I like to adjust things. And then I start at the bottom straight edge, and I'm aligning the score line that runs horizontally at the bottom, and the start of that slanted cut with the second score line on the smaller piece. I hope that made sense. It's a bit fiddly because you're working with a bit of an odd shape. Once you've got it there, give it a rub with your bone folder to secure it, and just check that it's where it should be and it hasn't slipped. And then once you're happy, you can go ahead and add glue to both the tabs on the other side. Now this side is more tricky to fix because you can't have it flat on the table. So again, just take your time and make sure everything's lined up as it should be. Again, I get the base right first of all, and then I move to the slant. Just give it a couple of seconds to take hold, and then I can go over it with my bone folder. And then just check that it's all aligned, and we're done. I'm now going to put the base of the box together. Now the back tab folds in first of all. Add glue to the remaining 3 tabs. Fold the sides in next, and then lastly the front tab, and that will leave you a nice clean edge on the bottom of the front of the box. I can now add the tray to the bottom of my box, and again it's a little bit fiddly to get it in there. It should be quite a nice tight fit, otherwise it won't stop the bottle wobbling about. Now I'm going to complete the top section of the box. So on what was my square piece, I have 3 tabs at the top. The 4th tab comes already attached to the box, and that's how we'll close it. Now, you see this back tab, the one that's attached to the main part of the box, doesn't reach to the edge, and that's because I cut it to A4 length. Now if you're using 8.5 inch by 11 inch, yours will come back even further, but it doesn't matter, it's absolutely fine. If you use 12 inch cardstock, then it will be the correct length, it will be the same size as the other 3 tabs. I'm now going to go ahead and add one side of this top section to the main part of my box, and I'll join it together by adding glue to the side tab. This first part's nice and simple because you can hold the box flat. So I've added my glue and I'm going to place the other section on top of it, and I'm going to line up my bottom score line, or actually it's the top score line, to make sure that runs all the way across. Now your diagonal cuts should match up, and then I can add glue to the other little side tab that's attached to the main part of the box, and I can bring the top part around. Again, this one's a little bit fiddly because you're up in the air, lining up that top score line where the tabs are, the larger tabs. We'll get there eventually. There we go. And then just hold it in place until it takes, and go over it with your bone folder. Okay, if I sit the box up the right way, I can check the side diagonals to make sure they're going to sit nicely. And this one worked out really well. And then I can concentrate on the top of the box. Now this one will be folded in just a little bit differently because I've got that short length on the back tab. Okay, I don't want to fold that in first because it will show. So I'm going to fold the side in, one of the sides, then the back, and sandwich it with the other side piece. If you use 12-inch cardstock, you can fold the back in first, it won't matter. So I've folded one of the sides in, and then I'm adding glue to the other 3 tabs. Folding that back tab one in next, and that will be sandwiched by the other side section. I'm just checking which is the side and which is the front. So this is the side, and that will be folded in next. There we go. So it's all nice and neat, nothing can be seen. And then lastly, the front tab, because I want that nice clean edge on the front of the box. Now as you go, just check that your slanted sides meet nicely and the top is nice and square. Hold it in position while the glue is wet. You don't want anything moving. Okay, so it's nice and square. The sides are sat very nicely. You want to use a ruler or a bone folder or something and just give it a press down from the inside to make sure everything's stuck firmly. And that's your box complete. All that's required now is to decorate it. The paper I'm using to decorate the sides of the box is all from the Hydrangea Haven Designer Series paper pack. Now I've already gone ahead and cut the paper required to decorate the base part of the box, but I'm going to show you what I did for the top of the box. Now for each section you have 4 main pieces, 3 of equal size and 1 smaller. The smaller pieces go on the top, back and the bottom front. Now also for the top you'll have an additional square piece, and this is for the top of the lid. Now if you have a pattern orientation running across the 3 main sections, you have to be very careful how you cut these. The middle section will not be cut, and it will be for the front, in this case, of the box, and remain as is. The first side section needs to be cut down to a point on the left hand side. So I'm going to mark the right hand side from the top edge in this case, because I'm working on the top. So I'm measuring down 4.8 centimeters or 1 7/8 of an inch, and just making a pencil mark. So if I bring it back in, I'm going to cut from that mark down to a point on the left hand edge. Okay, now for the other side, it's going to be the opposite. So I need to measure down on the left hand side, and again it's 4.8 centimeters or 1 7/8 of an inch. And then I'll be cutting from that mark down to the bottom right. Okay, so you can see my marks are on opposite edges. Now I'm going to pick these both up and put them back to back. I've got the marks together, you can see they're in the same place, and I'm going to cut down to that corner. And because I've got them back to back, I can cut them together, so I know the mats will end up being an identical shape. You could cut them separately if you want to, there's no reason why you couldn't do so. Now I'm going to line up that pencil mark, and I'm cutting from the mark down to the corner on the opposite side. So before you start adding glue, just position the pieces on your box to make sure that they've been cut in the right direction and your pattern orientation is still okay. Don't forget to erase any pencil marks. This is the Hydrangea Haven stamp set, and I'm using the detailed image and the 2 stamps for colouring. The sentiment I'm using actually comes from the Art Gallery stamp set, and it's just this simple happy birthday. I'll be stamping on normal weight Whisper White card, and I'm starting with Memento Tuxedo Black ink. Now I'm going to stamp the full flower with stem first of all, and then I'm going to stamp the flower head once more. I'll be using Old Olive ink for the stem and the leaves. And with this stamp, you just want to line up the stem. The leaves won't match exactly. You see they go over the edges slightly. For the flower heads, I'm using Highland Heather, Gorgeous Grape and Misty Moonlight ink. And these colours all match with the Designer Series paper. I'm going to start by covering all of the stamp with Highland Heather ink. Then I'm going to take a sponge dauber and using Gorgeous Grape ink, I'm going to add some around the edge and randomly in the centre. And then I'll repeat that with the Misty Moonlight ink. By the time I finished, some of the ink could have started to dry. So to reactivate it, all you need to do is to breathe on it or huff on it, and then I can stamp it down. Then I can repeat the whole thing again for the second flower head. So I'll ink up with Highland Heather first of all, then add some Gorgeous Grape, then Misty Moonlight, huff or breathe on the stamp and stamp it down. I'm using Gorgeous Grape ink to stamp my sentiment, and I'll punch this out using the classic label punch. I'm using the coordinating hydrangea dies to cut out my flowers. There's a full outline die for the full flower, and then for the second flower head I'm using this die, and this will cut out but keep attached individual flowers. Now it's up to you whether you want to raise the petals of some of these flowers or not. I'm just going to do some of them, and I find it easiest to sort of poke them up from the back. It adds some lovely extra dimension to your project. Now I'm going to add this to my full flower using some black mini dimensionals. I'm not going to put too many on there because they will obviously stick those little petals down flat again wherever I place them. And then I can position this over the top of my full flower. I can now add the flower to the front of my box. Now I'm going to start by placing a Gorgeous Grape oval, and this is the oval that came out of the inside of the box, so nothing was wasted. I've gone ahead and embossed this using the Tasteful Textile 3D embossing folder. I thought I'd finish off the front decoration by adding a few of our new pastel pearls. These come in 4 colours, but I'm just going to add a few of the Gorgeous Grape ones. I have a length of our sheer Gorgeous Grape ribbon here, and I'm going to wrap this around the box and tie it in a bow on the top, and this will help keep the top part closed. Now I'm going to leave the tails of the bow long, just in case I have to undo it and redo it, but when I gift the box I will trim them back then. And so here is my finished box. It's very pretty. I love these papers. Now you can open the box by sliding the ribbon off and then back on again to keep it closed. But as I said, if you do that too many times, the ribbon will loosen and you'll need to retie it. And here is the card I made to go with my box. So I've used all the same products for the card that I used for the box. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notifications bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Bye for now.